The envelope was sitting on my kitchen table when Garrett walked in from the barn. It had been there for 3 days. I hadn't opened it. I knew the return address, Dalloway and Pfeiffer, attorneys at law, Fort Collins. And I knew what was inside, the way you know a storm is coming not from the sky but from the way the horses go quiet. My father-in-law, Beckett Hollis, was standing in my dining room for the first time in 4 years, and he was watching that envelope the way a man watches something he believes belongs to him. His lawyer was beside him. My mother-in-law, Cora, was dabbing at eyes that weren't wet. And my husband, Dawson, was standing at the window with his back to all of them, very still, the way a fence post is still before the ground shifts. Then Beckett said, "Open it." And Dawson turned around. "Welcome to Calm Revenge Tales. I'm your narrator. This channel is for everyone who was told to be patient, to be gracious, to wait, and who waited long enough to watch the truth do what they couldn't. If that's you, subscribe. What's coming is worth staying for. My name is Marisol Vega Hollis. I am the co-owner and primary operator of Sage Creek Ranch, 1,140 acres of high desert grassland in Larimer County, Colorado. I run a cow-calf operation, 230 head of Angus cross cattle, along with a working quarter-horse program and a small hay operation that I lease to 3 neighboring farms. I have done this for 9 years. I built the hay barn myself, with 2 hired hands and a nail gun I bought secondhand from an estate sale in Loveland. Before I met Dawson, I had a livestock management degree from Colorado State and a debt-to-asset ratio that made my bank smile. I had no help from my family. My parents immigrated from Jalisco with a produce stand and a philosophy: if it belongs to you, you earned it. Dawson's grandmother, Eula Hollis, understood this. Eula was 81 when I met her. She lived alone in a double-wide at the far end of the Sage Creek property, growing tomatoes and raising a porch full of cats she'd named after country singers. She had sharp eyes and a slow smile, and she called Beckett, that man, the way you'd refer to a weather event. He had moved her to the double-wide when he inherited the main house. He told the family it was because she wanted to be independent. She told me the 3rd time we had coffee together, he wanted the kitchen. I brought her lunch every Thursday: green chili stew, chicken tamales, once a whole pot of pozole that she ate over 4 days and called the best thing that had happened to her since 1987. She had taught Dawson to rope when he was 7. Beckett had never once visited the double-wide without wanting something. The occasion was a 4th of July gathering at the main house. Beckett and Cora had been hosting it for decades. It was the kind of tradition that functioned more as a census than a celebration, a way to confirm who was still in the family and who understood what that membership cost. Dawson told me we didn't have to go. He said it the way you tell someone a road is icy, informative, not persuasive. I said we should go. Not for Beckett. For Eula. The invitation came by phone, Cora calling with the warmth of a hotel concierge. Dawson and Marisol, of course. We'd love to have you. Oh, and don't feel you need to bring anything. A pause. Actually, if Marisol wanted to bring something Mexican, everyone would just love that. She meant food. She always meant food. I had a doctorate's worth of patience for that particular word, something Mexican, and I used it now. I made my grandmother's pozole rojo. 6 pounds of pork shoulder, dried guajillo and ancho chiles, hominy from a can because that's how my grandmother did it, and I will not apologize. It took 4 hours. It fed 12 people, and it was the best thing on that table, and 3 of Beckett's brothers told me so, which I noted. Eula was there, in her lawn chair at the edge of the deck. She had dressed carefully, a pale blue blouse, her silver earrings. She told me, when I sat beside her, "You didn't have to come." "I know," I said. She looked at the pozole. "You made the one with the chiles." "I did." She held the bowl with both hands for a long moment before eating. Then she said, "He's going to ask you something tonight." I waited. "Don't let him frame it as fairness," she said. "It isn't." I didn't ask what she meant. I thought I already knew. I didn't. It happened after dinner, in the kitchen, with 7 family members present, and the back door opened to the sound of Brackett's brothers laughing on the deck. Brackett had a way of choosing his moments. Always when there were enough witnesses to validate him and not enough to protect you. He said he had been thinking about legacy. He said the ranch had been in the Hollis family for 3 generations. He said he understood that Dawson and I had done significant work to develop it. Then he said he felt it was only right that the original family have an interest in what it had become. A partnership. 50%. The kitchen went quiet. I want to be precise about what he was asking. He was asking for half of a ranch that Dawson and I had purchased from Eula. With Eula's blessing, at a documented fair market price. A ranch that I had spent 9 years expanding, financing, and building into something that appraised at $4.2 million. He had contributed nothing to this. He had, in fact, tried to stop the original purchase, believing the land should be sold to a developer in Cheyenne. His attorney was present. He had brought his attorney to a 4th of July party. I looked at Dawson. Dawson looked at his father. I said, "We'll think about it." Brackett's face did something complicated then. He had expected more resistance. He had prepared for more resistance. The agreement threw him, and in the gap, I saw something real and small and human. He was afraid of the answer. Not of me. Of the possibility that he had misjudged what he was owed. That fear lasted about 2 seconds before his face closed back over it. Cora said, "This is a family decision." Eula appeared in the kitchen doorway. No one had seen her get up. She looked at her son for a long moment. Then she looked at me. "It isn't a family decision," she said. "It's a business decision. Those aren't the same thing." Brackett turned to her. Something flashed across his face that I will not describe as rage, because it wasn't. It was embarrassment. He told her she didn't understand the situation. She said, "I understand it better than anyone in this room." He told her to go back outside. She did. But slowly. And she put her hand on my arm as she passed. Dawson turned from the window. He said one sentence. "I'll tell you what it was. But first understand that this sentence wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was the kind of sentence that arrives already finished, like a document that's been signed. The ranch belongs to Marisol, and I think you already know what Grandma put in the deed." The attorney's pen stopped moving. Brackett's mouth opened. And then we left. We went home. Dawson fed the horses while I washed the pozole pot. Neither of us said much. The next morning, I was up at 5:15 to check the south pasture fence where a coyote had been testing the wire, and by 8 I had replaced 14 feet of barbed wire, and was back in the kitchen making coffee. This is what the next 4 years looked like. Brackett cut Dawson off. The phrase sounds dramatic. The reality was administrative. A truck that had been informally borrowed was returned. Holiday invitations stopped. Cora called twice in the first 6 months. Both times to say she missed Dawson, both times to ask whether we'd reconsidered the arrangement. We had not. She stopped calling. Dawson's cousin Trent sent a message through Facebook suggesting that we were being selfish. I did not respond. Dawson did, briefly and without heat, and Trent did not write again. Eula came to live with us in August of the 2nd year. She had fallen, nothing serious, a bruised hip, but she had been on the ground for 3 hours before she managed to reach the phone, because no one in Brackett's household had checked on her. Dawson drove to the double-wide, helped her pack a single duffel bag and drove her home. I made the second bedroom into hers. I moved the cattle records to the office in the barn. The adjustment cost us $340 a month in home care assistance for the mornings I was out before 7. I did not experience this as a hardship. Eula was good company. She knew the land in ways I was still learning. She knew which draws flooded in April, which section of the north pasture had alkali soil, where her husband had buried a fence post in 1962 that still marked a corner pin I'd been trying to find. On cold mornings she sat at the kitchen table and watched me cook, and sometimes she talked and sometimes she didn't, and both were comfortable. She kept a cedar box. It sat on her dresser. Flat, about the size of a shoebox, dark reddish wood with a brass latch. I never asked about it. She never offered. I noticed it because she checked it the way some people check their phones. A quick, habitual glance, a small physical reassurance. One evening I was making red chili enchiladas, dried New Mexico chiles, not the sauce from a can, because Eula had opinions, and she came and stood beside me at the stove. She watched me flatten the tortillas in the skillet. My husband taught me to make these, she said. My grandmother taught me, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then, he would have liked you. I didn't say anything. I pressed the tortilla flat with a dish towel, and let that stand as my answer. She went back to the table. I heard the cedar box click open then closed. If you've been with this story since the beginning, you know that justice takes its time. And this story isn't finished. Subscribe to Calm Revenge Tales, so the rest of it finds you. She began declining in the spring of the 4th year. Slowly then quickly the way these things go. She stopped eating much. She slept in the afternoons. She had good weeks and then she had a week in late March that wasn't good at all. One morning I found her in the kitchen before dawn, sitting in the dark with a cup of tea she hadn't drunk. I sat across from her. The cedar box was on the table in front of her, which was the first time I'd seen it anywhere but the dresser. She looked at me across it and said, I already took care of it. I know, I said, though I didn't know exactly what it was. Beckett will say it isn't fair, she said. He'll use that word. I waited. Tell him, she said, and paused to breathe. That fair is what you earn. She passed in April. Quietly, on a Tuesday morning, with Dawson beside her. I stayed in the kitchen and made the puzzle. The letter came from Dalloway and Pfeiffer 6 weeks after Eula's death. Beckett had not attended the funeral. The letter was addressed to Dawson and me jointly. It asked us to schedule a meeting at the law firm's offices in Fort Collins. It did not explain why. I scheduled it for a Thursday. We arrived to find Beckett and Cora already seated, along with Beckett's attorney and a man I didn't recognize who turned out to be a CPA. The senior partner, a woman named Aldous Pfeiffer with silver hair and a green blazer, sat at the head of the table. She placed 3 documents face down on the table. And then she explained that Eula Rhett Hollis, age 85, had executed a revised last will and testament 14 months prior to her death. The will had been notarized, witnessed, and filed with the county. It was not a surprise to this firm. It was, however, apparently a surprise to Beckett, who sat very still with his hands flat on the table. Aldous Pfeiffer turned the first document over. Eula's liquid assets, $74,000 in a savings account, split evenly between her 3 grandchildren, Dawson among them. She turned the second document over. The cedar box, meaning its contents, was bequeathed to me specifically. Marisol Vega Hollis by name. Beckett's hands moved. She turned the third document over. And this is where the room changed. The deed to Sage Creek Ranch. The original deed, the one Dawson and I had purchased from Eula 8 years ago, had contained from the date of its drafting by Eula's late husband Reuben Hollis in 1979, a clause. A reversion clause. Standard language, common in agricultural estate planning. If the land was ever sold to a party outside of direct lineal descent or surviving spouse, Eula retained the right to reclaim the deed. Beckett had known about this clause. He had been the one to tell his parents to include it, 30 years ago, as a protection against developers. The clause had never triggered. Because Dawson was lineal descent. Because the ranch had stayed in the family. But what Beckett had not known, what Eula had never told him, was that 12 years ago, quietly, through this same firm, she had amended her own interest in that clause. She had transferred her reversion right to Dawson, and to any spouse of Dawson's, jointly and irrevocably. To me, Beckett said, "That's not possible." His attorney touched his arm. He pulled it away. Cora put her hand over her mouth. She was performing grief. I could see the performance. But beside her, Trent, who had apparently come as moral support, had gone a color I don't have a name for. He was looking at the table. Not at us. At the table. Something in him understood what this meant and was ashamed. And I noticed that, and I filed it away, and I did not use it. Aldous Pfeiffer explained. The reversion clause, the one Beckett had insisted on 30 years ago to protect the land from outside buyers, now protected it from him. Any claim Beckett made on the ranch would require proving that the reversion was invalid, which would require overturning his own parents' legal strategy, which he had personally advocated for. He had built the cage with his own hands. I reached into my bag and placed the cedar box on the table. I opened it. Inside, the original amendment documents. Eula's copy, signed and dated. And beneath them, a photograph of Reuben Hollis standing in front of the main barn. A barn that no longer existed, that I had replaced with the hay barn I'd built myself. On the back of the photograph, in Eula's handwriting. What belongs to you, you earned, I said. She told me to tell you something. Beckett looked up. Fair is what you earn, I said. We did not pursue additional legal action. We didn't need to. Beckett's attorney advised him, in writing, that any challenge to the reversion transfer would cost more than it could recover, and would almost certainly fail. We received this information by mail. We filed it. Dawson called his father once, 2 weeks after the meeting. He offered to have dinner. Not to negotiate, not to relitigate, just to have dinner. Beckett declined. His exact words, relayed through Cora, were that he didn't think he could sit at that table right now. That was his choice. We let him make it. Cora sends cards at Christmas now. Dawson writes back. I don't, but I don't prevent it. Trent called once late one night, and said he was sorry. He didn't specify for what, exactly. Dawson thanked him, and they talked for 45 minutes about a horse Trent was thinking of buying. That was that. The ranch is the ranch. The south pasture fence gets checked every Monday. The hay operation expanded this year. I added a fourth lease farm, which brings in an additional $18,400 annually. The quarter horse program has a 6-month wait list. Eula's dresser is in the second bedroom, which is a guest room again. The cedar box is on it. Empty now, except for the photograph of Reuben Hollis, and the note on its back. Every Thursday morning, before the ranch work starts, I make pozole. Not for anyone in particular. Just because it takes 4 hours and it requires attention and it fills the house with the smell of dried chiles and slow-cooked pork. And because my grandmother made it and Eula loved it and the land outside the window is mine. And it always was. That's the inheritance. Not the acreage, not the deed, not the number on the appraisal. It's knowing what you built, and being able to sit with it. Every one of us has an Eula. Someone who saw what we were made of before we did. Check on that person today, not tomorrow. Call them. Show up. Bring food if you can. If this story stayed with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment with one word for Eula. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the moment. Every story on this channel is waiting to find you. I'll see you in the next one.